We begin with the words of Mark Twain, who said, "There are two great days in a person's life, the day we are born and the day we discover why. One is easier than the other. One is a date and time. It's January 6th or May 29th or July 18th or September 6th. It's a moment you celebrate every year. It's the date when you made your first public appearance. That date is easy. The other one isn't. It's probably not a literal date at all. It's the moment you finally figured out why God put you on planet Earth. It's the reason you joined 7 billion other people on this ball of dirt floating through space. The first day explains your presence on Earth. The second explains your purpose. Often, it takes a long time to discover why you were born. Sometimes it happens very suddenly. I still can't believe that we lost Chadwick Boseman to colon cancer on August 28th. But no one can tell me that he wasn't born to be Black Panther. Boseman had qualities that few can describe, but almost everyone can see. And it helped that Ryan Coogler's interpretation of T'Challa was as balanced as he was paradoxical. T'Challa was paradox personified, an humble king, a quiet storm, a vulnerable man in a bulletproof costume. The role was an opportunity for any Black actor to shine, but Chadwick Boseman cast it in gold. Boseman's death would be heartbreaking even if he had never become Black Panther. By the way, did you know that Boseman auditioned for multiple Marvel movies, including the Guardians of the Galaxy? It also must be said that Boseman famously played real-life Black heroes, like Black baseball legend Jackie Robinson in 2013's 42, or singer James Brown in 2014's Get On Up, and lawyer civil rights activist Justice Thurgood Marshall in 2017's Marshall. In a career that spanned less than a decade, Boseman was a chameleon who quite literally embodied Black history. But the attachment of Boseman as T'Challa, Black Panther, was a specific symbiosis of actor and character that catapults icons into legends. Think of Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, or Christopher Reeve as Superman, or Alan Rickman as Snape. Boseman joins their ranks as an actor seemingly born to play an unforgettable role. And we can think of many variations on the same theme. She was born to be a mother. He was born to play baseball. She was born to be a senator. He was born to be a soldier. She was born to help the homeless. He was born to lead a nation. What were you born to do? That's a hard question. You'll spend the rest of your life trying to answer it. Since I've been in the pastorate, I've analyzed all the questions that people ask me, either in person or by email. And after thinking about all the problems that people have, I realized that most of them boil down to one simple question. Lord, what do you want me to do? Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 6 promises that if we will trust in the Lord, he will make our way straight. How exactly does he do that? Here are 7 fundamental facts about God's guidance. Number 1, he can put you exactly where he wants you to be. Number 2, he can arrange all the details years in advance. Number 3, he can open doors that seem shut tight. Number 4, he can remove any obstacle in your way. Number 5, he can take your choices and fit them into his plan that you end up at the right place at just the right time. Number 6, he can even take your mistakes and bring good out of them. Number 7, he can take tragedy and use it for your good and his glory. This is what Proverbs 16:9 means when it says that in his heart, a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. So let me ask you a crucial question. Do you know why you were born? Sometimes we find our calling early. Often the revelation doesn't come until late in life. Sometimes others see it before we do. Often the circumstances of life reveal it to us. I'm thinking of a man who fits that last category. He never knew his purpose for many years of his adult life. It was only after a series of events unfolded, nearly all of them outside of his control, and many of them quite painful, that the plan of God for his life became evident. This is the story of Joseph, son of Jacob, son of Isaac, son of Abraham. He was born to save his family. Genesis chapter 37 introduces him this way. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. These verses tell us three facts about Joseph. Number one, he's 17. Number two, he's working in the family business. And number three, he doesn't have a clue about his own future. Life is like that. If we said to Joseph, "Do you know why you were born?" he would have no idea. He would no doubt presume that he was destined to be a shepherd like his father Jacob, his grandfather Isaac, and his great-grandfather Abraham. When in doubt, stay in the family business. Doesn't always happen, but that's a good bet. At 17, that would probably be his first guess. But in truth, he has no idea of the events that are about to unfold. This strikes me as a crucial point because when we read his story, thousands of years later, we all know how it ends. That colors our estimation of these early events. Sometimes I am asked how to discover God's will. The answer is you can't. You don't discover God's will because God's will discovers you. You don't find it, it finds you. I heard someone say that God's will is more like a sunrise than a sunburst. Out of the darkness and chaos of life, God's will rises slowly over the horizon. It's not so much that we see the sun, it's that by the sun we see everything else. So it is with God's will. And that reminds me of another common metaphor, the blueprint of life. Does God have a blueprint for your life? Yes, he does. There's only one copy, and it's locked up on the third floor of the administration building in heaven, and I don't know of any way you can get a copy. I'm emphasizing a point that's as true for us as it was for Joseph. God's will is revealed to us a little bit at a time, like the sun slowly rising, or a blueprint unrolling before our eyes. First, he was Jacob's favorite son. Then he was betrayed. Then he was sold into slavery. Then he was purchased by Potiphar. Then he rose in Potiphar's house. Then he was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife. And then he was thrown into prison. Then he met the baker and the butler in prison. And then the butler forgot him. Then he stood before Pharaoh. Then he became the prime minister of Egypt. And then he met his brothers. And then he gave his family a home in Egypt. All of that ended up saving his family and preserving the line of promise. Joseph rode the roller coaster of life. At the moment, we're at the front end of this amazing story. But just remember that when we meet Joseph as he's tending the flocks, he doesn't have a clue about the roller coaster ride his life is about to become. To back up a bit, there's a 21st century word that perfectly describes his family. It's a word that you won't find anywhere in Genesis, but it fits nonetheless. Joseph grew up in a dysfunctional family. His father Jacob had 4 wives. He had 11 brothers scattered among those 4 wives. He had one full brother, the youngest child of all, Benjamin. And with all of that, there's bound to be some trouble. And there was. Genesis chapter 37, verse 3 says that Joseph was his father's favorite son, the son of his old age. It means that he was the first son by Rachel, the woman Jacob always loved. Jacob was always his favorite. All the brothers knew it. The family looks like this: 1 father, 4 mothers, 12 brothers, plus 1 daughter, Dinah, and 1 favorite son. Doesn't take a genius to figure out that this is a disaster waiting to happen. Trouble is brewing right under the surface in Jacob's complicated family. And out of it will come Joseph, who many years down the road will rescue the brothers who betrayed him. As the story opens, there is no reason, none at all, to see any of this in advance. At the beginning, we mostly see dark clouds on the horizon. And from this, we glean an important point. Your background is no impediment to your service for the Lord. Joseph came from a family that was in many ways out of bounds. It certainly was not a neat, clean, one man, one woman nuclear family. He was born into a family where jealousy, comparison, and distrust were the rules of the game. It was not a happy family. And yet God chose Joseph and used him mightily. Not many of us come from perfect families. Actually, none of us do, because there's no such thing. Who said this? At the end of the day, who everybody meets in the public eye, the public image, and myself are two different people in a way. It's a very accessible version of me. I'm definitely more introverted. I'm definitely darker. I'm definitely more, at times, pessimistic in real life. I shouldn't say pessimistic. That's a little strong. I'm more pragmatic in real life because I come from a whole different body of experience. Those are the words of Corey Monteith, who was a star of the hit TV show Glee, who was 30 years old when he died in a hotel room in Vancouver of an overdose of alcohol and heroin on July 13th, 2013. In a 2011 interview with Parade magazine, he talked about his past experiences with drugs and then made this conclusion. I don't want kids to think it's okay to drop out of school and get high, and they'll be famous actors too. I'm lucky on so many accounts. I'm just lucky to be alive. And now he's gone. And the Bible has a lot to say about this. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. James 4:14. So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Psalm 90:12. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Mark 8:36. The real problems we face are not out there. They're always in here on the inside. That's where we fight our greatest battles. More than 2 decades before he died, Michael Jackson sang these lyrics. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. And no message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change. There is wisdom here and a lesson we all need to learn. This world is a messed up place, and the most messed up part lies inside the human heart. There's one reason we know the Bible is true. It speaks the truth about the human condition. It doesn't lie to us about our unlimited potential or tell us that we are basically okay the way we are at the moment. It says we're all sinners, separated from God, dead in our sin, spiritually blind, unable to help ourselves. And this is where the gospel becomes so incredibly relevant. It doesn't make us feel good and then say, just try harder and you will be okay. Often when I preach, I will quote the familiar words of Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Heads nod all across the church. When I ask about the last phrase of verse 22, no one knows the answer. But that phrase in verse 22 is the key to verse 23. For there is no difference, Romans 3:22b. No difference between rich and poor. No difference between religious and pagan. No difference between Jew and Gentile. No difference between young and old. No difference between housewife and harlot. No difference between criminal and choir boy. No difference between American and Ugandan. We're all in the same boat, And unless God does something, we're all going to sink together. We're all broken people. Some of us know it, some of us don't. And if you can relate, this story is for you. If you come from a broken home, this story is for you. If you don't get along with your brothers and sisters, this story is for you. If you were abused, this story is for you. If your friends lied to you, this story is for you. If you've done jail time, this story is for you. If your family doesn't understand you, this story is for you. Leo Tolstoy begins his epic novel, Anna Karenina, with this first sentence: happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. This is true of Joseph and his brothers. They are an unhappy family, and they are having their own way of showing it. So how did God's will unfold? The beginning of Genesis 37, Joseph is tending the flocks with his brothers in Canaan. By the end of the chapter, he's a slave in Egypt, his life having taken what appears to be a massive turn in the wrong direction. But God has other plans in mind for Joseph, plans that require him to be in Egypt. How does a 17-year-old Hebrew shepherd become the prime minister of Egypt? Here are the first few steps on that long journey. Number one, he worked in the family business. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. That's verse 2. Number 2, he stood for different values. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. That's verse 2. No doubt Jacob knew that some of his sons were men of low character. Joseph simply reported to his father what he saw and what he heard. Number 3, he was marked out as special at an early age. Bible says, now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. That's verse 3. This is the part of the story that almost everyone knows. The phrase robe of many colors translates a difficult bit of Hebrew. It at least means that the coat was richly embroidered, most likely with long sleeves, the sort of a robe a son of royalty might wear. We may debate among ourselves the wisdom of Jacob's gift to his favorite son. Perhaps he should not have made his feelings so obvious, but nothing in the text suggests that he did wrong. By wearing the robe, Joseph signaled to his brothers that he was destined for greatness in his father's eyes. The robe had long sleeves. It also meant that he couldn't work in the fields the same as his brothers did, thus increasing their animosity toward him. And number 4, he had 2 strange dreams. In his first dream, which is in verses 5 through 8, he and his brothers were gathering bundles of wheat in the fields. When his bundle stood up, the other bundles bowed before it. Not too hard to figure that one out. Needless to say, his brothers weren't happy with what he shared. The second dream was even more grandiose. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing to me. That's verse 9. He told this one to his father and his brothers. At first, his father rebuked him, but later he pondered what it meant. Number 5, his brothers hated him more and more. Note how things have developed into a downward spiral. The text mentions it 4 times. Verse 4, his brothers hated him. Verse 5, they hated him even more. Verse 8, they hated him even more. Verse 11, his brothers were jealous of him. No wonder they could not speak kindly to him. Soon, their anger and envy will lead to a shocking betrayal. This account is both sad and instructive. Often those closest to us will not recognize God's call in our lives. Many a young person has had to fight through family opposition in order to serve God. Not everyone will applaud your decision to serve Jesus. Some will oppose you openly. Others may criticize you behind your back. In Joseph's case, his brothers are about to commit a heinous crime. They will conspire to kill their own flesh and blood, all because of envy. Hebrews 12 and 15 warns us to see to it that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble. That is precisely what happens here. Centuries later, Solomon would write these words: "A tranquil heart gives life to the flesh, but envy makes the bones rot." These sad words are about to come true. Envy will not only cause trouble, it will nearly destroy the family. Number 6, his brothers betrayed him. Now events unfold swiftly. A, the brothers conspire to kill him in verse 18. B, when they see him coming, they derisively say, "Here comes this dreamer," in verse 19. Then they plan to kill him and throw him in one of the pits. That's verse 20. And then they ended up throwing him alive into the empty pit. That's verse 24. And then comes the most callous act of all. They ate a meal while he was in the pit. You don't believe me? It's in verse 25. And while he's screaming for help, his brothers ate a meal, no doubt laughing at their little brother's shouts from the pit. What sort of men do this? Along come some desert traders at just the right moment. So Judah comes up with a clever plan that will make some money off their brother's distress. What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. So the deal was done. Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver, the price of a slave. If that reminds you of someone else who was sold for 30 pieces of silver, it should. Jesus, who was betrayed by Judas, was a distant descendant of Judah who sold his own brother. Only one detail remains. What will they say to their father when Joseph does not come home with them? Taking the coat of many colors, they dipped it in goat's blood and told their father that a wild animal had killed Joseph. It was not just a lie, it was a bald-faced lie. Jacob believed it, of course, but what else could he do? Number 7, he ended up as a slave in Egypt. Verse 28 tells us what happened next. They took Joseph to Egypt. There he was sold to a man named Potiphar. For a moment, let's stand back and look at Genesis 37. What a crazy story. This is all kinds of messed up. Where is God? You know, God is not mentioned at all in Genesis 37. His name is nowhere to be found. What should we conclude from this? Does it mean that he's abandoned Joseph to his brother's evil schemes? Not at all. Though everything seems to be spinning out of control, at every point, Joseph is exactly where the Lord wanted him to be. In the field with his brothers, reporting to his father, telling his dreams, looking for his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, marched off to Egypt. While this chain of events must have seemed dark and chaotic to Joseph, it was all leading exactly where God intended it to go from the beginning. Let's wrap up this message with 2 enduring lessons. Number 1, when God chooses a leader, he often allows enemies to arise who will put him to the test. Where did Joseph's enemies come from? His worst enemies came from the people who should have been closest to him, his own flesh and blood. What started as hatred congealed into envy, which resulted in conspiracy, which led to violence that was compounded by callous indifference and ended up in shocking betrayal, which was covered with an evil deception. Jesus warned that a man's enemies will be those of his own household. Let us then not be surprised when people we thought we could trust turn against us. It doesn't always happen, but when it does, the results are devastating. Number 2, when God chooses a leader, not even his enemies can stop him from doing God's will. This is the other side of the story. Nothing the brothers did could cancel God's choice. Behind Jacob's favoritism And behind those strange dreams, and behind the brothers' evil schemes, stood the God of the universe working his will. Not even the treachery of envious brothers could thwart God's plan. Years later, Joseph would say, "You meant it for evil against me." And that was no exaggeration. They first meant to kill him and only spared his life because they saw a way to make money off his disappearance. It was evil through and through. Didn't God know about the betrayal? Didn't God know about the slavery? Didn't God know about Potiphar's wife? Didn't God know about the false accusations? Didn't God know about the prison time? God knew all those things and a lot more besides. Joseph was God's choice, and therefore God led him through the pain of betrayal. It had to happen that way. At the beginning of Genesis 37, Joseph is tending the flocks with his brothers who already hate him. At the end of Genesis 37, he is a slave in Egypt. Is he better off or worse off? It depends on your point of view. It depends on how big your God is. That brings us back to the words of Mark Twain. There are two great days in a person's life: the day we are born and the day we discover why. It took a long time, but Joseph eventually discovered why he was born. He's not there yet. Do you know why you were born? Perhaps the right answer should be, I was born to serve the Lord. Everything else is just details. Seen in that light, the real hero of Joseph's story is not Joseph. It's God. The whole story illustrates how God accomplishes his purposes for us, even when we are clueless about the big picture. That comforts me because I rarely feel like I see the big picture of what my life is supposed to mean. And what little do I do understand happens as I look back and see how the pieces fit together. Even this evening, as I'm saying these words, I have no special knowledge about tomorrow or the day after, much less what the next 5 years will hold for me. I do believe God has a blueprint for my life. I also believe I don't have access to it. I only see the blueprint as it unfolds before me a little bit at a time. So it is for all of us. April 5th, 2013 was the worst day of Rick Warren's life. He and his wife, Kay, sensed that something was not quite right. Their 27-year-old son, Matthew, had suffered from mental illnesses all his life. As Rick would later say, he and Kay had done all they could to help their son, including seeking help from the best medical experts and the best therapists they could find. When they went to Matthew's apartment that day, they found it locked. No one came to the door when they knocked. Fearing the worst, they called the police, who entered the apartment and confirmed their fears. Their son, whom they loved so much, had taken his own life. Besides being the pastor of Saddleback Church in Southern California, Rick is also the best-selling author of The Purpose-Driven Life. He's probably one of the best-known pastors in America. Millions of people around the world have been helped by his ministry. And after his son's death by suicide, Rick stayed out of the pulpit for almost 4 months, returning on the weekend of July 27th and 28th. Because he is so well known, the event garnered huge media coverage. Rick and Kay both spoke to the Saddleback congregation, thanking them for their love and support. In trying to explain how his Christian faith had helped them through this tragedy, Rick said, God knows what it's like to lose a son. And then he added, when you go through a difficult time, you automatically start to try to find an answer. But explanations never comfort. You don't need explanations. You need the presence of God. When Elizabeth Diaz filed her report for Time magazine, she ended her article with these words. And then as the service closed, Rick joined the worship team in singing a favorite hymn, Blessed be your name. He lifted his Bible high above his head and declared boldly to the God he serves, you give and take away. My heart will choose to say, Lord, blessed be your name. Only a man with a big God can talk like that. A small God will never do when tragedy strikes. We need a big God, and we have one. The God of Joseph is our God too. So the hero rises out of the turmoil of a dysfunctional family. Joseph proves you can come from a crazy, mixed up family and do amazing things if you have a big God. Stay tuned. Much more to come. You won't believe what happens when he gets to Egypt. Let's pray. God, thank you for being a big God. Thank you that our obstacles and impediments are not a problem for you, and that our purpose and that your purposes for our life will stand. Thank you again for having a blueprint. Give us the strength and the wisdom, the trust that you will do what is right for us at the right time. And now unto him who is able to keep you from falling, and to present you faultless before his presence with great joy. So only wise God our Savior, the glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and forever. Amen.